I'm Kyle Olson, founder of The Midwesterner. I'm at Marlena's Bistro in Holland, Michigan, where I'm going to be talking to a number of statewide candidates and others that are asking for your vote in 2026.
Marlena Hackney left communist Poland in the 1980s for a life in America. She opened Marlena's Bistro in Holland. When Gretchen Whitmer began issuing lockdown orders in 2020, Marlena refused to close. She was arrested and jailed for trying to keep her business afloat. But that didn't stop her. She's still serving the Holland community every day. My guest today is Aric Nesbitt. He grew up on a farm in Van Buren County, worked as a congressional page, just like me, and in 2023, he became Republican leader in the Michigan Senate. Now he's running for governor and won the straw poll at the recent Mackinac Republican Leadership Conference. He says he's running to make it easier to live in Michigan. So we just had the straw poll at Mackinac, and you prevailed. What do you attribute that to?
I think it's our grassroots efforts in the campaign of people understand around the state that it's hard to make it in Michigan right now, whether you're a small business owner, you're a family. It's tough to make it in Michigan right now, and our message is all about how do working families, workers, small business owners, our young people, our kids are able to make it in Michigan. You know, we really made sure that we've been engaging folks around the state.
It is hard in Michigan. Prices are going up. Where do you think the blame lies?
Yeah, so you look back at the history, capital follows the path of least resistance. And what this governor and the Democrats in Lansing have been doing, have been putting up resistor after resistor, making it harder and harder to make it here in Michigan. Higher energy costs, lower reliability. And what have they done? They passed a Green New scam to actually increase energy costs by $2,400. So it's even tougher to make it. If you're a manufacturer, you're looking at a state with lower energy costs. And we have the highest energy costs in the Midwest. Insurance, we tried to get some insurance reform 6 years ago, but instead the Supreme Court and working with Governor, to work with Governor Whitmer, we hardly got accomplished what we needed to get accomplished. And then any of those reforms have been gutted. And you look at our car insurance, our house insurance, it's all gone up. And so we got to make it easier for working families, for workers to come here, but we got to lower the cost of living. And we got to lower the cost of government so that it's efficient and more effective. And over the since COVID, I would say, you've seen this area where only 1 out of 5 state workers are even showing up to work. And yet, here where we are right now, this restaurant, the owner, Marlena, she tried to stay open and she got arrested. She fled Soviet communist Poland for freedom. And yet she was arrested for just participating in the free market system. Never again.
So let's talk about that. So we're at Marlena's. A lot of people know her story about how she stayed open. She was arrested, taken all the way to Lansing. Went through this huge ordeal. A lot of people have said, "Oh, we've got to move on from the pandemic." But I think that there are lessons to be learned, and I think elected officials need to scrutinize that and say, what happened can never happen again. So
I have 3 young kids, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And we were expecting our second born in 2020. Go to the OB's office for that first ultrasound right before the end of the first trimester. And I couldn't go in. I had to stay in the parking lot, in the car. And I get a text from my wife saying we had a miscarriage. The most painful thing a parent, a father, a mother could go through, and I couldn't hold the hands of my wife because of Governor Whitmer saying that no, as a father you can't be in that OB's office, that ultrasound with your wife to comfort her. This can never happen again. And it's not just our story. There's tens of thousands of stories like that where they couldn't say goodbye to a parent, a grandfather. They had to wave goodbye through a window because you've created a government so powerful They can micromanage you and tell you what to do. That can never happen again. And the next governor needs to believe in the individual, needs to believe in families, needs to believe in our constitutional rights, and reform the policies that are currently in place. And we're going to be ready on day one to work on those, to make sure that we actually devolve the authority of the executive back to the individuals instead of this all-powerful ruling class that we saw during COVID. This governor can never be forgiven for what she did to my family, to my wife, and that's the same thing with thousands of other stories that are around here in the state. It's personal to me. I think it's personal to a lot of people.
It is. I had kids in school, and suddenly they're home, and they actually thought that kindergartners, first graders who can barely sit still, are going to sit in front of a computer and learn to read or learn to do anything else.
So talking about how tough it is for our kids to make it in Michigan right now. 3 out of 4 fourth graders can't read at grade level. Just because of the COVID lockdowns, a study came out about a year ago saying the average student in Michigan schools is 3/4 of a grade level behind just because of the COVID lockdown. Some of the worst in the nation. When they closed those schoolhouse doors, they wrecked a generation of our kids. You couldn't buy seeds. You couldn't buy paint. This could be, abortion clinics could remain open along with liquor stores, but hardware, certain hardware
Churches.
stores and other had to be closed, right? And that's our First Amendment right, is, practice our religious freedom. And there's this micromanaging. And then you saw things where they reopened casinos. Well, why? Well, the union said we're going to lose health benefits. And so within 2 days, the governor said, no, casinos could reopen. But not arcades, not bowling alleys, not swim schools. It was all about political science and polling data. Her use of science and data was BS. It was all about what she thought would improve her national image.
Why?
Well, I think she has
Because
larger ambitions.
she was positioning to be vice president. You had talked about the income tax. There's been a lot of talk about let's eliminate the income tax, let's eliminate property taxes. It's just sort of a tax elimination free-for-all. Obviously, the government needs money to operate, at least to provide the basics. Where are you at in terms of income tax, property tax? What should be done?
Yeah, so the cost of government in Michigan is too high, the regulatory burden's too high, the cost of licensing and everything, all the other functions of government is too high. And so you got to go ahead and do a full review and push out the waste, fraud, and abuse. And you see that with the House Republican budget that was passed earlier this year, is that, and you've seen over the last 6.5 years where the government's growing by nearly 50%. I don't know whose paycheck's grown by 50% over the last 6 years. Governor Whitmer, with her treasurer, with Attorney General Dana Nessel, and a Democrat Supreme Court, completely bastardized state law and state constitution, and undid an annual $800 million a year income tax cut. So we gotta fight to win, to one, lower the cost of government, phase out these taxes to become competitive. I mean, it would be great to have a zero income tax as a state, because we've seen other states, whether it's Tennessee, whether it's Florida, Texas, South Dakota, Washington State, Nevada, all states that have a zero income tax. But long term, if we're really going to reshape our state, there's a real battle between, and being able to make it in Michigan, there's a real battle between the Democrat socialist agenda that they want to put in and Republican free market capitalist agenda that President Trump and others believe in.
In 2024, there was a lot of discussion about should Trump be the president, should he be the candidate, and all of that. You had wanted Governor DeSantis to be the candidate. Talk about that and sort of how we went from DeSantis to Trump and why you support him.
I made a mistake 2 years ago. Early last year, early in the 24 election cycle, I endorsed President Trump. I was a surrogate for President Trump. I worked with the state party and with the RNC and the Trump campaign to make sure that we were doing everything we could to win the state for President Trump last year. I did doors for President Trump. I was a Trump Force captain last year, and we worked to make sure that working together, we won the state for President Trump. And we see the difference that President Trump is making every day as he makes America great again, and he works to make it in the USA. We need to be able to make it easier to make it here in Michigan. We all know President Trump would like a better partner here in Michigan, and I would be that better partner. Whether it was this year, some of the wins, such as trying to, forcing the Illinois governor to build that electronic barrier for an Asian carp from trying to come into the Great Lakes, period, protecting our Great Lakes. Our new fighter mission in Macomb at Selfridge Air Force Base. I was an honor to welcome President Trump off from Air Force One and riding the Beast with him. As he announced the new fighter mission. And so I would be a partner with President Trump, and I would stand strongly with President Trump to make sure that we make it easier for working families, for our law enforcement, for manufacturers and small business owners to make it here in Michigan again.
What's your observation about the dynamics between Trump and Whitmer? Because she's in a situation where, I think people are trying to figure out what her strategy is, because it seems like if you look at Gavin Newsom or you look at Pritzker or others who are sort of maneuvering to be president, it's like, who can be the most anti-Trump? But yet she's not. She's sort of, I wouldn't say it's the middle path, but she's sort of, she's not taking that tack necessarily. So whether it's at Selfridge or wherever else, the Oval Office, wherever, what's been your observation when it comes to that?
Yeah, you know how political this governor is. Governor Whitmer is very political and understands public relations better than most governors. Too bad she's a horrible governor for the people of Michigan. She's only made it tougher and tougher for working families, for businesses to make it here in Michigan by repealing right to work, increasing the state's income tax, making it tougher for businesses to invest and grow here in the state. And she's left behind a whole generation of kids with her COVID shutdowns and with lowering accountability in our schools and not trusting parents to make those choices for their kids in schools. And so I can't speak for the governor on any of the stuff that she's doing, but it's through a political lens. She's trying to figure out some kind of political lens. And so what I'm all about is, how do you make it easier for families to make it here in the state of Michigan? I think Michigan's at a turning point right now. It's an inflection point, and this is our last chance as a state to really make it here. And if we do nothing, if we just keep things the way they are, status quo, we're going to be a smaller state, a less populated state, and a less educated state. And so we got to really shake things up in Lansing to be able for our kids to make it here in Michigan, for our families to make it here in Michigan, for our businesses, small business owners to make it here in Michigan. And this is why next year is so important, not just for governor, but for attorney general and secretary of state, because who you elect makes a difference. The policies they enact make a difference, and you can see that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate you.